Hello FS100 class. Here is a brief video summary of the first part of Chapter 5 and our coverage of self-management. Remember, even though the textbook uses the phrase time management, we are going to say self-management. We cannot change the time we're given. We all have the same hours in a day, days in a week, or weeks in a month, months in a year. So we cannot manage time. We can only manage ourselves and how we use our time. The first few slides talk about organizational strategies, so I will ask you to look over those slides. But in Chapter 5, we are going to focus on a self-management system and tools and techniques to use with our schedule. So the first part of this chapter will focus on the self-management system. There are 4 steps in this system for self-management. Number 1, we need to track our time for a certain time length, about a week or so, to realize how we actually are using our time currently. So the first step is to track our time. The second step is to identify our priorities. Everyone's priorities will be different, and sometimes your priorities will change depending on the day, the week, or the time of year. The third step is to build your schedule, knowing how you spend your time first and what your priorities are in your life. Then you build a schedule that allows you to spend the most time on your priorities. And step 4 is to use tools to track your progress and help you approach time effectively. When you track your time, you are going to write down what you do every day for at least 1 week. Now, there is no judgment here. You are simply listing everything you do for at least a week. Use a piece of scratch paper or notebook paper, or if you already use a planner, record your activities on that paper or in that planner. After you record your activities for at least a week, then you ask yourself some questions. You examine the patterns of your time usage, and you can draw some conclusions. Step 2 is probably the most important part of this process, where you need to look at everything that's going on in your life, all of your commitments, and prioritize them, with number 4 being critically important, number 3 being highly important, number 2 moderately important, and number 1 of little or no importance. Again, you've tracked your time for at least a week, so you see how you are using time. You can look at that tracking to see what are your priorities, but you also need to look at your life in general and say, what are my priorities based on my goals? Remember, the first few chapters of our book and our course asked you to focus in on yourself in terms of your positive psychology, the goals you would like to set, your motivation, your mindset, and your decision making. So now that you've done all of those internal elements and you actually have goals that you've written down and you're working toward, you need to prioritize the other tasks in your life in addition to those goals. The highly important elements of your life to help you achieve your goals would be 4s and 3s. You are still going to have activities that are 2s, and ones. But you definitely need to identify all of the things going on in your life in terms of their importance and what are your priorities. This whole strategy really boils down to that one word, prioritize. When you determine the priorities and you have your 4s and 3s, then you need to build a schedule that allows you to spend the most time on your priorities. The list on this slide includes academic priorities, work, family, but only you know what are your 4s and 3s. So you would need to spend the most time on your 4s, a little less time on 3s, and then lower amounts of time on 2s and hardly any time on 1s. In our next lesson, we will talk about tools to use with your schedule, including to-do lists and project plans, plus other tools that are not in the book. But that will be the next lecture. Until then, thanks.